Ooh, how quiet it is when you speak.
Good to go.
Hello and welcome to the Milford Finance Committee, Wednesday, October 10th, 2018. First item on the agenda, we have a revision on one of our minutes, the September 17th minutes. Why are you always correcting me? September 19th minutes, in which Article 23 in our minutes read 17,500, and actually was supposed to be 20,000 was the amount for the median markers. So we amended that, so I need a motion to accept the amended minutes.
The amendment in the minutes?
Yes, Diana changed the minutes and sent
You
them out.
favorable on the amended minutes?
Motion by Chuck, second by Jerry. All those in favor for accept the amended September 19th minutes, unanimous?
No, it isn't. I wasn't here yet.
Sorry, Aldo. One abstention.
Extension.
Next is the approval of the minutes for our last meeting, September the 26th.
I was here for that one.
So moved.
Motion by Al, seconded by Mike. All those in favor? Unanimous? Next, the two items on our agenda tonight are two things that both by email and by our discussion last time are two topics that we wanted to have people come in and really give us updates on that we haven't heard from for a while. The Downtown Revitalization Committee, that conversation kind of started when we had talked about their architect and their grant writer. And the conversation kind of turned that we hadn't heard from them in a while, and we want to get an updated idea of where they stand with their plan and that kind of stuff. So I reached out to Ronnie, who actually did a great job last night at a presentation at the town hall run-through, and I asked him if he would come in and give us kind of an update on what's going on with the Downtown Revitalization Committee. They've been doing a lot. He's handed a handout out to everybody there. I don't know if you've got it. Ronnie, why don't you come up and let us know what's going on with the Downtown Revitalization Committee. Al, and then Mike. So Ronnie, thanks so much for coming in. I appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome. Welcome, everybody.
Ronnie, it's been quite a while since we've seen you, so to be honest with you, I don't know how far back you want to go, because it's been a while, but kind of just give us an update on what's going on. And
Yeah, so one of the key things we have going, which worked out in our favor, we're receiving $150,000 from the state. That's pretty much on its way to us, to the town, and that's geared totally for the facade program. So we've been working hard on coming up with criteria and standards for this facade program.
Thank you, Ryan and Brian.
Yeah.
It's not a done deal yet, though.
Yeah, we're close.
Wrong size. Thanks,
Well,
Paul.
we don't have the money in hand.
But you're right, it's not in hand yet, but there's a lot of work that we can get done in the meantime. So we're trying to come up with an application for the landlords in the downtown district. And we determined what the downtown district is with the study that we had done. And it's outlined in that brochure that I gave you, the annual report. And basically, it goes from Sacred Heart Church just past Water Street, goes down Central Street to Cafe Sorrento, and then it's all of Exchange Street. That's the main intersection. And then it comes around Draper Park a little bit, and then goes up Spruce Street behind 89 Main, and then in front of Memorial. So it's pretty much the very local downtown. And anybody in that district is going to be eligible for this program, and there's criteria that has to be followed, and we're working on that now. And I've been knocking on a lot of doors over the last year to talk to the main landlords downtown, and they're excited about it. They want assistance. And originally, a year and a half ago, I came in front of everybody hoping the town would put the money up. But right now, we got the state money, which is going to give us a good start. And so that worked out good. And what we want to do is use this money for the facades, for for any rundown properties, awnings, signage, lighting, really based on the same program that we had about 20 years ago. That was a facade program. We're using the same standards. We want to try to get more uniformity downtown. And we have this money to work with once it comes in, but there's a lot of work involved in between. So the goal is to get as many landlords, especially with the buildings that are really run down, and get them to participate. That's one of the steps that we're trying to do, is beautify the downtown. And that was one of the first things we wanted to get done. And the other thing is part of what we're looking for in the article is an engineer architect just for this facade program. And we actually got a nice bid in for it's $5,000 he'll stay with us right through the $150,000. He'll be the point person that is needed for this program. We did it when we did it 20 years ago. We had an engineer architect that would show us the standards that we had to follow.
Whoa, hello.
Sorry. Okay.
Right, yeah.
We're good. So he has the set of standards, or the architect that we hire will have the set of standards to make sure everybody that wants to be part of the program will follow the standards. And that's important to be part of the program. And it's going to be the 25%, 75% split. There's going to be a recapture part of that where if they sell the building right away, they'll have to pay the money back. It's prorated, probably going to be over a 10-year period. So it's very important to have this. It's an engineer architect just because they know they'll understand the standards. There'll be a person that will be between the town and the landlord and the tenant to make sure that he can show them the different styles of awnings, the different signage that can be used. And if they don't want to go along with it, then they probably won't be part of the program. So the part of it is to create these standards and to get some kind of uniformity downtown. And also, we're going to ask at that time for the landlords and the tenants to remove all the extra writing out of the windows. There's a lot of hodgepodge writing and different lettering in the windows to really come up to more what the zoning is for downtown. And that will be something that has to be done to be part of the program. So that is the main reason we need to have an architect, engineer, and they'll be drawing up a rough draft to show them what it will look like if they change the sign, put a new awning, change the color of the building, and then an actual, whoever gets the job to do it, the signage company or the awning company, will do the actual technical drawings. So it's just a point person that knows the standards, that will keep them on track. It can't happen without somebody like that. So that's what that money is. We're looking for that, to cover that article for that reason. Then we're looking to have the town hire a subcontractor, grant writer. And recently I went to, there was a summit, a downtown summit that took place in Lowell, and they invited all 351 towns, and I went and represented the town of Milford. And it was really interesting, and I got to meet the head person. Her name is Emmy Hahn, and she is pretty much the one in charge of writing out the grants. She knows Milford. She remembers the programs that we did, and she was wondering, where have we been for the last 15 years? In other words, she is saying the money is there, we just need to have the appropriate way of getting it. And they're willing to help. She's going to come down. I invited her down, and she wants to come down and walk the beat with me, and I can show her what we're trying to do. And what I got out of this seminar was the state is very proactive for downtowns now, more than ever. And they have grant money that they want to give away, incentive money for businesses to come to towns, waiting there for towns. In Milford, with our demographics and the fact that we haven't really gone for the money, you can only go for it every now and then, but we're due again, is what it comes down to.
They finally recovered after Sue tried to beat
Yeah,
him up so bad.
exactly.
The fighter is off the mat now, and we can get back in the fight.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. The time has come again to get another round of funding. It's there, we need to get it. This 30,000, is probably going to be the best money the town of Milford's ever spent, because I think it's going to bring in $1 million over the next couple of years.
You set the bar pretty high. I don't know.
No, I feel confident, and I mean about maybe an acquisition of another building to take it down, to create parking, possibly a parking, a basic parking garage, possibly. We have a problem with all the trees now are overgrown. There's money to handle that, to take them and replace them with trees, obviously. And
Ditches, I hope.
yeah, they have to be a different, right, because the root system got so big that I don't understand why there isn't this.
Tree climber pretty soon.
I know, yeah. Yeah, so
Volunteer.
No.
without the general maintenance, they can get out of control.
Ronnie, you said something, uniformity of downtown and the selection of the facades. You can't force anyone to do that, am I correct?
No, only if they want to be part of the program, we can.
Program.
Yeah.
So I presume what you're hoping to do is get the uniformity so you don't have a uniform area and all of a sudden here, looks like the carousel at a circus, and then this way. Is that what you're shooting for?
Yeah, that's the overall goal, and it's gonna it's gonna take me or somebody knocking on the door, talking to the landlord and the tenant, and convincing them that let's all get on board and do the right thing.
75% of the ticket
Yeah.
if
There's
they
your
play.
reason.
I mean, now, that's the incentive.
That's the incentive. It's yeah,
By our rules,
Yeah.
we pay 75%. If you don't,
You've got to give them an inducement to be there.
yeah, exactly.
great
yeah,
idea,
yeah.
but there is incentive to play inside the rules.
Yes, yeah. No, I mean that's big. I mean that's part of how this is going to work. Yeah.
So why don't you tell me about some of the first-year accomplishments? Because that,
Yeah.
to me, that's one of the things that we
Well,
really led into, because we did cover
sure.
your articles last time.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Well, the big thing was, to start off, was acquiring the 3 buildings downtown, and 2 of them have come down already, which I believe you know, and you'll see the new picture. There's a couple colored pictures. Recently, they graded that empty lot, and they painted the Stones building, so it's not a big eyesore right now. It looks fairly good. And Mike's going to stay there for another year and a half, I believe. He's using it, and then at that time, hopefully we'll be able to take that building down. And I believe it's about 50 to 60 parking spaces without building a garage is what we can get with the tiered parking that was already designed for it. Yeah. That's okay. So that happened. It was supported by everybody, and it's already a positive thing that's happened. So the other thing that's happened was the $150,000 grant that it was Ryan Fatman who was able to come up with the money.
State legislature, right?
Yes.
Both.
Yeah. And, we had him at our meeting, we talked to him, and within a couple weeks, he came back with some very good news. So that was big. And there's more, he feels there's more, another round of it next year. So with the grant money and this, a state person on our side going to bat for us, we can probably get a lot done without having to come here to ask for money.
That'll go over very well,
What's that?
if you don't have to come here and ask.
Okay.
I thought the Rotary thing was a nice.
You'll get
Okay,
full
yeah, so,
support from the
so
committee.
another accomplishment, we've been trying to get some private, public help in different ways. We approached the Rotary Club. One of the big eyesores we have coming into downtown near the Sacred Heart Church, across the street from it, is a long bed. And it's, if it's not maintained on a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, the weeds take over, and that's how it's always looked. So we approached the Rotary Club and asked them if they would like to sponsor that entire bed. I talked to Steve Chapman, Chaplin, and then he got Donna Wolf on board, and between them, they came up, they did an architectural plan, which you'll see in that brochure, and they've come up with $8,000 that they committed to that bed, which will be done over the next week or so. They're going to put all plants and shrubs that are geared up for salt and bad weather, and they're hardy plants. But the main thing that I stress to them, it's one thing getting the money to do this, but how about maintaining it? Because what's the sense of spending that money and not having it look good all the time? So they committed to maintaining it from the spring to the end of the fall. So to make that bed look pristine all year round, or during the spring to fall.
And I just want to give kudos to them. This is
Yep.
the type of stuff that people in groups in our town do to make Milford such a good place that it doesn't get recognized a lot. Like the Rotary's going to go ahead and give us $8,000, and not only that, the manpower to maintain it throughout the year and that type of stuff.
Big.
That's types of our Milford organizations, the way that they give back, and they don't get recognized for stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of things happen in town. Is little groups will continue to contribute,
Yep.
and even when they're not recognized, someone like the Rotary Club will do something great like this. And
Yeah, absolutely.
it
Yep.
takes an army to make
Yep.
make everything look good.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, and in the, another committee, the Celebrate Milford, I reached out to Terenzio Vapacelli and talked about his awnings. He controls the Mason building. He manages that. And he couldn't wait for our program. So they went ahead and took down their awnings and put up new awnings. But he knew what we were trying to do downtown, and he's on that Celebrate Milford committee with Joe Soares, and they made a commitment of $5,000 to beautify downtown one way or another, and we have to come up with the best bang for the buck. So we're going to work together with them, decide where to put that money. But that could be a yearly thing also, if they see that it's used correctly. So that's something else that we did. Then I did approach the selectmen on the weeding of the downtown area, because the weeds tend to take over. And actually, I'll give credit to Terenzio Vapacelli. We invited him to our meeting, and he said, he brought to my attention the city of Marlborough. The mayor of Marlborough made a statement that there will not be one weed in our downtown Main Street, Marlborough. And he says, Ronnie, you won't believe it if you go there. So sure enough, that Sunday, me and my fiance went to Marlborough, and I might have counted 5 small weeds in their whole complete stretch. Absolutely beautiful. They don't really have the right mix yet, and I'll get to that pretty soon.
Can I interrupt while he's on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to get Al too, because I was waiting patiently. He didn't want to
Yeah.
interrupt.
No,
I'll wait,
just-
go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
it's just
Bobby.
while he's on that topic.
Yep.
Because that's one of the questions I had. We paid X amount of dollars for a private company to go out and take down the weeds from, I think, the old Stop and Shop up towards the hospital.
Yes,
And you're right, you mentioned in here several times, maintenance is the key.
is the
Do
key.
you envision that each year the town is going to have to hire private contractors to go out and do the weeding?
Yep.
And I guess this is more of a question for the selectmen and the highway department,
Well-
neither of which is represented here tonight, so it's unfair to them.
Yeah.
But I
Although
think that's
we- I-
one thing we ought to try to fix.
Bobby, that's an excellent point. But Bobby, he's actually spoken with Scott Christopher.
Yes,
actually does
we
have
had a
a-
meeting with Scott
Okay.
and the town administrator, Rick Bellani, and the first step was to see what they could do versus hiring somebody. And we asked him to come up with a plan. And honestly, I guess he came back saying that just to get it the way we want it to look, to really control these weeds throughout the whole season, I don't know if it didn't fit in their budget or just they would have to hire people to make that happen.
Okay.
So
Going
the
forward
selectmen,
then?
what's that?
Going forward,
Going forward, yeah.
what happens?
Okay, so going forward, the selectmen made a decision. Bill Buckley made a comment also that he wants to see the weeds gone on an ongoing basis weed-free. So he gave the administrator the okay to bid out a subcontractor, and that's how they came up with, I think, Busy Bee.
Right, right,
I
I
got the-
understand
got
that.
that.
I'm talking about next year.
Yes, no, it's got to happen right throughout the year, somehow. There has to be an
So that's-
ongoing
that's
maintenance.
an open issue.
Yes, yeah, so that will be something that we'll be looking for money to keep that going one way or another. I don't know how that will work, but
I would think with the Parks Department that we've expanded people and equipment, and the Highway Department where we've expanded people and equipment. We
Yeah,
have to take
so
a good
that-
hard look at those two
sure,
organizations.
maintaining-
And I
maintaining it,
understand it's
yeah.
unfair those people aren't here represented.
no, no, so I don't want to speak for them,
I'll be
but
hard pressed to go out every year
Ye-
and hire a private contractor to do that.
yeah, so that's something that we're
Thank you,
talking
Al.
about, yeah, yeah. But that, we as a committee, and I think everybody here, and especially if you take a ride through Marlboro, you will appreciate it,
What did it
yeah.
cost? Do you
I'm
know
not
what it
being
cost,
critical.
Ronnie?
It was 6,000, I believe, 6,500. Well, that's the initial, because it was out of control. Now, what will it cost them to go through it 1 month from now?
Probably nothing.
3 weeks from now? Well,
A month from now,
yeah.
we're gonna have 3 feet of snow on the
No, but, if they did this in the spring, right, every month, how much is it? I think we should find out, and then get the parks or the highway department involved and see how that all works out. But honestly, if we can keep that going, especially if we're gonna start turning these buildings around, yeah, yeah. So,
question, Bobby.
we'll figure out the best way to get that done.
I love what you're doing short term. There's a lot of us that want to take pride. When we were kids, you walked downtown to Grant's, got your popcorn on the way home. I mean, downtown was where to be. My question to you is, when you first started this campaign, you talked about long-term goals.
Yes, and we have them in that.
Now, I'm talking real long-term
Yep.
goals, where, what are you gonna do to bring people in? Because I lived in the Harvard transition of Brighton.
Oh, yeah.
Where they bought all the buildings and made them all pretty, and they didn't rent them. So all of a sudden, the pizza stores, the restaurants were starving. And to me, if you don't find a way of getting people to live downtown, I don't know how these stores flourish. The parking will help. I'm all for it. But realistically, if I own a sandwich shop or a little restaurant, I'm gonna live or die by the people who, well, it's just, I'll go downstairs.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm asking is, a couple years ago, you seemed pretty fired up that you'd get a committee that would stick it out for years.
Yeah.
Not just put lipstick on the place,
Yeah.
but actually revitalize it.
Oh, a great point. So at the summit, downtown summit in Lowell, the number one thing that they talked about was creating more people to live downtown. That is the number one thing to revitalize the downtown. So you're absolutely right, Al. So that, for us, that includes zoning changes. That includes, here's the other thing, the state has a lot of incentives for private developers, nonprofit developers to come to downtowns to build housing through a unit, 12 structure units or high rises. They have really big incentives for developers to come downtown. And they said the number one thing to revitalize a downtown is to create the people living, because that's what's going to, really sponsor all the businesses that we want to try to get in. And that all works together. So that's a big zoning change. And our goal, one of our things we're going to be working on going forward, we're going to bring in some experts on zoning, come up with what we feel, compared to other towns, and have backup information to support us, and put it to the town to see, the planning board, the whatever board will have to see that and see how they feel about it. And the zoning's changed in downtowns throughout, especially the ones that are successful. At this summit, I listened to Northampton. He might have been the planner for the town. They actually went to a 0 parking per apartment. Beverly went to a one parking spot per apartment. Both very successful downtowns. So sure, where's the parking going to come? but the main thing is parking is not the same as it used to be. Two parking spots per apartment is not the norm anymore. If you read the downtown revitalizations throughout the country, parking is a big thing that's going down. Towns want less parking to give incentives for developers to come in. A lot of our goal, one of the long-term goals, is to create these upscale apartments, is what I envision, on the offskirts of downtown. Sumner Street, Central Street, South Bow Street, where the mobile station is, that area there, creating housing and maybe upscale apartments where we can now go to the hospital, Consigli Construction, and tell them that we have their professionals or their workers can now live in these apartments and walk to work. That's what it's coming back to. It really is. Somebody said at the summit that in the 70s, the downtown merchants were in fear of the big box stores coming in, and sure enough, they took away all our business and they moved to the outskirts, the strip malls and the major malls. And now the big boxes, stores, and the malls are in fear of downtowns because it's coming back that way. And it's happening. You go to Hudson, Marlboro, all these communities are really, and people in general, the new people, the younger generation, they don't want to own cars. They want to live. They want to live and be entertained in the same area, and it's a different mindset. Sure, we're a few years away from that, but this is what it's coming to, and this is the way I see the town of Milford going, and that's part of in our plan also.
There's no question. I mean, this is something that obviously has been backroom talk for years and years. Fix downtown, fix downtown, fix downtown. I think Marlboro and Hudson finally got to a point where they said, you can't just talk about doing it anymore. You actually have to be proactive, and you actually have to do it. It's going to cost money. You're going to have studies, and you're going to have to buckle down and do it. If you're going to turn it around, you can't just talk about it. Yeah. So I think if we want to fix downtown Milford, and I think there is a strong commitment by many, many people, and I'm one of them, to revitalize downtown, we really need your committee to be successful. Yeah. And I think you need to continue the work you're doing. I love your short-term accomplishments, but to Al's point, this is a long-term goal. People come in all the time and they do stuff really short-term, and then all of a sudden it just... Yeah. But Ronnie, I know you, and I know Tony, and the rest of the committee, that you guys are committed to this, and Josh and everybody else on that committee are committed that this is a long-term benefit to this town, and I appreciate all the hard work. So with that, I'm going to open up for comments.
Just a good question. Ronnie, on page 11 of your, and I'm in a little bit of a disadvantage because, and this is one of my pet peeves, is to get a document like this and have to read it, but that's
No,
okay.
it wasn't for tonight. It was just to give you the take
And
home.
it's a great document, it really is.
Yeah.
So I will read it when I have some additional time, but I did have one question. On page 11, under the topic, how to attract new business, bullet B states, what needs to be done to attract the microbrew industry? My question to you is, why is the microbrew industry being emphasized here as opposed to any other industry?
No, you're right.
Or educational program, or you name it?
We have that in here also, the educational
I
part.
see that, but it isn't.
No,
quoted.
it's because
Is there
we wrote it
something I'm
because it
missing?
came up more than once. It's funny, a big part of the downtowns that have all been revitalized, Marlboro, Hudson, a brewery is been a key anchor for a downtown. Yeah,
Really?
you can't imagine, if you go and see the younger generation,
Millennials.
they hang around these breweries. Yeah. It's
It
a
won't be a pot shop. Not in Milford.
not in Milford, no, we know that.
That's great, thank
Yeah,
you.
but
I
that's-
will
but
pass
that-
it
yeah.
on. Thank you.
Anyone else? We're good. Well, Ronnie, thank you very much. We were a little overdue, to be honest with
Thanks,
you, and I
everybody.
blame myself for that. But it just talking about the articles, spurring the conversation again, and we're like, oh, we haven't seen downtown in a while. So thank you and Tony so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. I'm gonna start trying to come to your meetings again. I know I've been
Yep.
lapsed in that, and I do apologize. So for any help I can be with it on that. But I appreciate the update, and I know that was a draft, so just keep us in the loop as things evolve, obviously. Let us know. Also, one thing that I'd like you to be in touch with, Al runs our long-term capital stuff.
Yes.
And for ticket items that are particularly large. It may not be considered town capital because we're fixing up buildings for residents and businesses. I still would like it to go through that if at all possible.
Okay.
I know it may be a little weird to be going through that, but to me, because of the amounts involved, I think it helps our planning process. It may not, we're not gonna put it against our 1.5, but I think just to help us play the shell game with the amount of money that we're talking about, because we're talking about some significant dollars, that it would help our planning process, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of keep an eye on the loop. It'd almost be like a second spreadsheet for it, but I think,
You know,
kind of think.
and getting this grant writer could eliminate a lot of this. Yeah, because there's a lot of money out there.
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you so much, Ronnie. I appreciate you coming in. All right, well, that was a great update. We haven't talked to them in a while, and obviously, like I said, because of talking about the articles and the questions about the architect and the engineer, I hope that was answered tonight by him, and then any other questions that you had about the downtown revitalization. So next item on the agenda, the schools. The schools subcommittee chairman had asked me to have the schools in, and to be honest with you, that goes kind of hand in hand with what we were talking about, having constant communication between the years. So guys, why don't you come up?
Mr. Chairman, if I could take a minute.
Yep.
Questions come out as to several members, me included.
And myself.
who- I'm just pointing out myself, but it's you, it's Aldo, there's a few of us who have relatives on the school payroll. And the question came out, are we in a violation of the ethics standards of the anti-nepotism law? I want to bring it out that when my daughter, and I'll make it personal, when my daughter was hired in the school system, I reported myself to the ethics committee, the state ethics committee, to find out what my limitations were. And they were very, very clear. They said I should not participate in any direct budget or functional decision, so no line items. I cannot be on the school subcommittee, because that deals with salaries and budgets. However, they said there is no prohibition, no issue with voting on the omnibus budget, you know, the 60-odd million dollars that we give the school. And their comment to me was, if that was the case, we couldn't get anybody, because you all benefit from the police, you all benefit from the fire. You couldn't get anybody to serve on a selectman or a finance committee role. So I just wanted to be clear. Once my daughter was hired, I have not been on a school subcommittee to go over any line items, but I will continue, unless the ethics laws have changed, and I don't think they have in the last few years, to take a very deep look at how the school budget affects every other budget in town. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Chuck?
When I was a substitute teacher at Blackstone Valley Tech, I was told by town council that I had to abstain from voting or getting involved in any discussions regarding their budget.
That was Jerry Moody.
Yeah.
Yeah, line items.
Yeah, I was told I had to abstain from any,
That's why no one on our subcommittees got a relation to a employee of the Milford School System. That's why it's so hard to get members on that subcommittee.
But the problem is, Chucky, you can't not have an opinion on 62% of our budget. You know, it's like you can't walk away and say, okay, I'm not gonna vote on fire, police, or school.
yeah.
It just doesn't work.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Jerry.
I think we should have the Ethics Commission come in and explain the rules to us. Let's invite them to our meeting and let them tell us what,
Great idea.
Yep.
just let them, rather than you
Jerry,
and
that sounds great.
everybody taking their own opinion of
Absolutely.
what they've been told.
Yeah.
Because I've heard,
'Cause I made the call too.
I've
so.
heard a version of what you said from the sitting selectman that puts me over here in left field. Then I heard another version from someone else.
That'd be great, have them come in.
Have them come in, sit right here in front of all 15 of us. And we'll go down through it line by line, person by person, and find out what is the answer,
Absolutely.
once and for all.
We should do that every few years, just in case anything changes.
We all have an ethics course we have to subscribe to.
Yep.
And sign off on to, but let's just have them come in and say, this is the town of Milford. This is what we do. Are we in line, are we out of line?
Nope, that's a great point, Jerry. And now,
Then we don't get all this second guessing, are we gonna get fined, are they gonna come and beat us up, we'll just ask them
Great
right up
idea.
front.
yep, I love it, Jerry.
Put that on there, probably one of these upcoming November, December meetings, that we don't have anything else to do.
Jerry, with all due respect, whenever they'll come.
Okay.
I mean, I'd love to say come in November, but if they say they
Tell
can't
them
make
to
it.
come the second Wednesday in December, we'll have something else to do.
All right, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So anyway, Mr. Scavvy, you were out of the room. I had mentioned that you had asked to keep the lines of communication with the schools open, so that's why they're in here tonight.
Yes, this was a good time for them to come, so
Absolutely.
welcome, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us. So we have 5 quick updates for the committee tonight. One thing I want to talk about is story of a building. Then I'm going to have Kathy come up and speak about the 2020 budget and some of the trends and patterns we're seeing there, as well as kind of some of the trends we're seeing in Chapter 70 funding. Also, MCAS results, Craig's going to just share those broadly with you and the change in the accountability plan. And then also want to talk about the long-range education facilities plan. Before Eldo leaves the room, I want to give him a shout out, though.
He moves pretty quick. so
I
you
know,
better talk
he's like the
fast.
Flash. October 29th, Eldo is going to be one of our featured speakers. The MSBA asked the Milford Public Schools to partner with them on what's called the Story of the Building Woodland Elementary School. And it's a program really designed to kind of walk kind of the people across the state, school committees, school building committees, architects, builders, through the process. And they've asked Eldo to be one of the featured speakers. So, and he has a wealth of opportunity, or a wealth of experience and knowledge around the building process and program. And he was vital to the successful Woodland Building Project. So I wanted to give kind of a quick shout out to Eldo, who's going to be featured.
Leave on a high note. I'm kidding with you.
I'm sold out.
That's a tough thing to say there, though.
So we'll share some more information with that, but it's just a great opportunity to kind of build a relationship with the MSBA and share kind of the experience. The other piece that I want to talk about before I turn it over to Kathy is the long-range education facilities plan, which is connected to a story of the building. And we're going to be doing a presentation at the October 25th school committee, the long-range education facilities committee, which is kind of a mouthful, is going to give a presentation to the school committee. And then we're going to go and we'd like to schedule time to meet with this committee and provide do a presentation and get your input and feedback, the selectmen, and to the public as well, to get feedback and input on kind of some of the things we're thinking about before we move forward with a finalized plan.
Can I ask you the question? I apologize for interrupting you. Is your long-range facilities committee, is that the same as your long-term educational?
So I think there's a lot of confusion out there.
That's why I'm asking the
Yeah,
question.
so the long-range plan is really the facilities plan. And that's part of like the long range, that's what the MSBA needs for any future building projects. And that's what was in place that ended with the completion of the Woodland project and what we've been kind of working on for the last 2 years. So we've contracted with NESDEC, which is the New England School Development Council, to do a facilities kind of overview for us. And they provided a very, detailed report that's been very helpful. We also completed an accessibility plan in conjunction with the town that just was, I think was completed within the last couple of months. And we're taking all of that, we've taken all that information and incorporated into kind of a series of recommendations, which will become the long-range education facilities plan, which is required by MSBA as part of that
I
process.
just wanted to clarify because
Okay.
we've
No.
always called it the long-range education
And that's-
plan. And I knew what you meant, but for the public and for everyone else here at
Absolutely.
the table, I just wanted to.
And because it's got like 9 words in the title, I think
Yeah.
we shorten it sometimes. So those are my 2 updates. I'm going to turn it over to Kathy right now to talk about the 2020 budget, some things that we're seeing, and also some of the trends we're seeing for Chapter 70 funds. Okay?
Okay, so I had a handout. Let me move up. So I've given you a handout this evening, and essentially it's got 2 trends. One being our Chapter 70, and I just want to go over where Milford is trending and some of the changes that the state has made where you're going to see an increase in that Chapter 70.
Real quick, this is what was presented at our forum last night.
I was just gonna say, and I showed up, you guys were really quick. I had something in town hall and I showed up at 8 o'clock. You guys were already out. So I did have intentions of going, guys. I'm sorry.
This is the abbreviated version.
Okay, that sounds good.
I know I promised to be there, but I spent the night with my mother in the hospital, so I couldn't make it.
Sorry to hear that, Al. So essentially, there was a Foundation Reserve Education Committee that reviewed Chapter 70 back in 2015 and made recommendations to the state overall to try to create a better formula to better fund certain communities and what they're spending on education. So one of the major impacts that Milford will have is that they looked at the EL community, the special ed community, and economically disadvantaged kids, and said, look at, these kids require additional funding. So therefore, you need to look at the cost per pupil for each one of those categories and increase that foundation budget for communities that have a higher number of enrollment versus communities that do not. It shouldn't be all equal. So they enacted that this funding year in Chapter 70, only at a modest rate. They didn't fully fund it. They said, look, let's try to phase this in over a period. I think, if my memory is correct, it will be over 7 years that they'll fully fund what the Foundation Reserve Committee has recommended. So
There
this year,
is a new formula.
there is a new formula, and they're gonna try to phase it in. This year, it was at a modest rate of the impact for Chapter 70. Going through the slides,
Hold on, if
Okay.
I may. Chapter 70, what does that have to do with your budget?
it has to do with the funding mechanism for the foundation budget. So in the foundation budget, that's a formula for creating the Chapter 70.
No, I understand that that'll take some pressure off the town of Milford's budget.
Correct.
But just because Chapter 70 goes up or down, that doesn't affect your budget, does it?
Right.
I just want to make sure
He's
because,
Correct. No,
He's correct.
that's right,
The over-
that's right.
The aggregate budget is the one you're talking about.
Right.
They're talking about the supplemental.
no, this is nice. The gazinta's good. But
Yeah, But you're,
even
you're
if-
you're right on, though.
even if the years when Chapter 70 didn't go up, and how much is Chapter 70 now?
29 million?
It's about 47.5%.
It's about
24,933,000.
So it's
Under
less-
25 million.
So it's only about 40%. So whatever Chapter 70 does, the town is still kicking in 60% of the school budget.
That's correct, but Chapter 70 for Milford in FY '19 went up by 7.7%, almost 1.8 million. So the difficulty is we're discussing our budget in April, and then they're funding the overall
Kathy,
communities
that's where I'm
in
confused.
July.
What they do to the budget,
Well, it has a direct impact, Al, on cost per pupil. So we would get closer
statistically,
to
I
our.
agree. But if they went down, if they went down $1 million, would you
Right.
tell Kevin to cut $1 million out of your budget? No,
They come to us.
it'd come to us.
Well, would we come to you because it would be after the fact? So if we're talking about our budget in April,
Yes.
it's helpful to know that there's going to be an increase to help fund the
And
overall
again,
school
I love
impact.
the idea that the town of Milford will get a benefit, because we've been pitching in 60%. I mean, when ELL first came in, and we got hit with 600,000, we didn't get anything from the state, but we ponied up 600 extra. So I just want people, because people get really confused. They say, oh, the Chapter 70 budget's going up, so the school budget goes up. It's like, no, we have intentionally insulated the school from state politics because we didn't want our kids to suffer. So this is great news. Don't get me wrong, I love it. But it doesn't affect how much money we fund in aggregate the school.
Or does it?
It shouldn't, because if it does, the years it goes down, we're going to have to be pulling money out, and that's not fair to the kids.
We don't take, the total budget for the school is the budget to run the school.
Thank you.
Period. Beginning and end. A to B, that's it. We don't factor in the state funding to decide what we're gonna do in the schools. At least I don't recall us ever doing that.
2003, when we had the layoffs.
Sorry. Oh, that's right, we did have, we
15 years ago.
got to cut
We
back.
learned from that.
We had to go back and cut.
2010 was a bad year, too.
Yeah, but okay, I just want people to understand that as a town, we've taken a very strong position that we're going to support the kids at the levels we think are right, regardless of what the state does.
Nobody would argue that, Al, because
Okay.
even last night in the presentation, we had all our new initiatives that last year we requested and were granted, and all those positions, the one-time expenses, were all discussed relative to the school budget and our growth.
Good.
We've had growth. I agree with you.
Well,
please define growth for me?
New positions of need in program area that aligned with our
New staff
focus areas.
positions or or growth in population of
New
students?
staff that were highly needed, mainly at the high school.
We've grown one pupil a year since
I
1974.
know that. In fact, some years we actually declined.
But I mean, overall average, the first class out of Milford High in 74 was 222 kids. I was one of them. Last year was what, 265? So 40 years later, we got 40 more kids. The need per kid has changed. But our population has been very, very predictable.
All
Sorry.
right, Kath, why don't you?
Okay, continue. As you can see, we also provided for the FinCom's review, just a history of the trends for Chapter 70 and, relative to our budget asks, what the state is funding and what the local contribution growth is. Essentially, Chapter 70 is increased in Milford at 43% overall in the last, say, 10 years. And relative to the per pupil expenditure, the state average right now is at $16,014, and Milford is a little bit below that at $14,192.
Kath, I apologize, I'm the one that told you to keep going, and then I got confused.
Okay,
So you're talking that the Chapter 70 impact in 10 years went up 40%. So you're talking about from 1 million to 1.7 million? Is that correct?
No, we're talking about the overall number. We're strictly talking operating budget.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry. That's where I was confused. All right,
Yep.
go ahead,
So we're
keep
talking
going.
Yes, operating budget and.
Perfect, thank you. It cleared it up, thank you. I apologize, Kathy.
okay. So literally, we're here to just explain the impact of Chapter 70, how it's changing. The demographics are changing, and that's definitely having an impact on our Chapter 70 growth. We wanted to be informational about it. We are tracking it. We are reviewing these numbers as we build and look at our enrollment for our 2020 budget cycle, which will begin in a few weeks. We do have a couple areas that are trending higher, which is one of them, very volatile, which is our out-of-district need. We're trending higher with students attending outside programs for whether it be social, medical, or educational need. So that does come with a rather high cost, and unfortunately, they do have to be transported, so it comes with a cost to our transportation budget as well. In addition to that, we've received another unfunded mandate for this school year, which is new, and that involves transportation again, transporting students to, that might be listed as a foster student, if they choose to go to or come back to Milford, whether they're in Boston, Worcester. We have 3, I believe, in Boston right now. It comes with a cost, and we have to fully fund it. So that is new. And
Elaborate on that.
I.e., for example.
yes, so if a child is placed in foster care in that foster home, they're currently in Milford.
Yeah.
The foster home that's eligible to take them in is in Boston. They have the right to come back to Milford every day, so we transport them. And so that's a new mandate.
And it's similar to the McKinney-Vento students who
It's
are
very
homeless.
similar.
It's
Yep.
almost an identical program.
Trying to keep families together is really what it is.
Correct. They're trying to keep them, at least the school situation,
Yep.
remain stable,
Got it,
which is
okay.
other possibility.
That's correct. So like I said, we're opening up our 2020 budget in a few weeks. It's going out to all the building leaders, department heads for next month, and we'll be reviewing at central office level in December and meeting with our subcommittee shortly after that.
Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely, go ahead.
The math on this page, Kathy,
Yes.
per pupil expenditure,
Jerry. I thought I was talking to him.
2017. State average 16,014,
He's asking the question. I wanna-
Milford 14,192. Then underneath it says Milford is currently spending 11.4% less per student than the state average, or 1,800 per student. So this is not the state average per student.
Yes, it is.
Which one are you pointing to? I'm sorry.
19192 plus 1822 is 16014.
Yeah. So
Okay,
Milford is
okay.
spending 14,192,
Gotcha,
69
okay.
per student. The state average is 16,014.
Is could one assume, or is the intent that if we climbed up to the state average, that certain indices and measurements and benchmarks would increase to the state average as well?
So are you talking about MCAS scores?
You tell me.
So,
You're the expert.
I would say it's,
I mean,
I would say it's a little more complicated than that. I think we're trying to give you a sense of kind of where we stand financially, because there's a lot of data where we stand, like, based on, I wouldn't say academically, but I'd say based on MCAS scores. So it's just giving you a sense of what we're spending per pupil compared to the state. I don't think you're ever gonna see like a dollar for dollar correlation, because there's so many other factors at play.
So additional per pupil spending does not automatically translate into,
I could say that
Better
with, I could say
performance.
that with 100% certainty. Yeah. I think there's investments we need to make to support kind of the growing and complex needs of our students. I don't know if that dollar for dollar investment is going to, like, if you invest $100,000, I can't say it's gonna equal 3 SAT points or something like that. There's no formula that is connected to that.
But if I could jump in, it could lower class sizes, so additional money, which would give teachers more opportunities to work with small groups of students. And so I don't disagree with Kevin that you can't equate $1 to growth, but we could look at with an extra $2,000 per student times however many students we have.
but
there
would
are
that
things
translate
we
into
could do.
measurable
It
differences on the plus
It
side?
could, if the teacher's working with smaller groups of children,
And what would those
absolutely it
be?
could. Well, I'm sorry, what?
Jen,
Jerry,
with
you're
all due
next.
respect, could you identify yourself?
I-
I'm sorry, but people
Look
don't,
amazing, you didn't move up. I'm one of the school committee members.
that's all, as you talk, I love the idea of school committee members coming, or any committee members coming, but to be fair, just announce yourself beforehand.
Jerry.
Well, my question was, what would those be? You said there would be several. What would they be?
What would what be, the improvements?
Yes.
It would give a teacher more opportunities to work with smaller groups of students,
Right.
to identify the patterns in their academic deficiencies, to target the interventions that they're using with those students. So if you have a class of 25 students, it's more challenging to do that, especially when you look at the demographics
Sure.
of students in our
I
classrooms.
understand that, but what measurements would you see improvements in?
So I can kind of jump in and say that we've made 2 investments over the last few years that have yielded, I think, tremendous improvements. One was the Writing with Colors program at the high school, where we're right now, above the state average at the high school level for ELA performance, and for MCAS is an indicator, as well as well above the state average for student growth percentile. And that was a big shift. We implemented the program in a small way 3 years ago. In the last 2 years, we've seen kind of tremendous improvement in growth. Another example is we just added a math teacher last year to allow for students who are struggling with MCAS, who are basically at risk for not passing MCAS at the 10th grade level based on their 8th grade MCAS scores and a number of other kind of indicators, class performance, and benchmark testing. And so what we've done is we've piloted a smaller program the last couple of years, and we've seen that students who take this intervention course show significant growth compared to a control group that didn't take the course. So now we have the full math teacher in place, and it's not that one new person, it's a combination of folks who are teaching the class in the math department, but they're all teaching the same curriculum. And our anticipation is we'll see growth with the students who are struggling. So that's 2 examples of ways where investment can lead to improvement.
Thank you.
The per pupil, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna get to Jerry, then Al, then Andy. Jerry.
I have a question about this number called per pupil expenditure 2017. Where did you get these numbers, might I ask? Where did
From
you,
the DESE website,
from the,
DESE, Department of Education website.
you got them, and our number is 14,192, and the state
Correct,
average is
correct.
6, okay.
If anybody's interested, they can email me, and I can send you the link to it's like a spread.
Which one is it?
It's a spreadsheet that's on the, it'd be difficult for me to tell you where it was, because it's like.
Well, I can
3
find it,
links in.
I can,
But if you go to like the state reports,
Yep.
and go to per pupil expenditure, just jump on that.
okay, because that, I'm a little concerned that doesn't really reflect what we actually do here.
I emailed that, Jerry, I emailed that to you with all the schools around us. I didn't do it, but it has the state on it too, but all the schools around us, you have it. I emailed it to you before.
So how do we compare to Hopkinton, Holliston, those kind of things. Those are our peer group that I worry about, you know.
Without having the data in front of me, I couldn't answer that question. in terms
Okay.
of a local
Because
comparison.
a lot of the reports and budgeting we do here in town do not reflect benefits of the employees. The school department piece of the puzzle does not reflect healthcare, does not reflect pension liability in your, what's commonly referred to in the town as your share of the total town's expenses. That doesn't, those benefits are not allocated across departments. Now, Zach and I have had numerous discussions about how we are going to tackle that in the very near future and get those allocations assigned by department so we can get a fair comparison. And my concern was that our pension and healthcare costs were not included in that number. And I'm just not exactly sure that that's.
Well, you
that's
just need
good.
to know if there's consistency for all of the reports.
That's really what it comes down to. I don't care whether they're in there or not. I just care if it's apples to apples. To your point, Jerry, that's really what it comes down to. Yeah.
It is an apples-to-apples comparison.
And that's really all that
It's based
matters,
on-
yep.
It's based on operating budget, so the same amount, like the same fund codes.
It all depends on how people report. There's 351 towns, and I could imagine that there's 351 different ways it could be reported. But if it's all a standard format, all going into the state computer, then, okay,
Yeah, we do a big upload of all the data to the state, both financially as well as, a number of different
so
areas.
then- and again, when we go,
Student population,
when we go to meetings and things like that, we go to Needham and Dedham and all these other places, you gotta be careful, are they allocating benefits, healthcare and pension liabilities to those different departments? Otherwise, it's a convoluted mess.
yeah, my understanding is that it's apples to apples,
Okay.
and we're looking at the same kind of fund codes
Okay.
that are compared. So
No.
this is strictly operating budget. I
Great
think.
point, Jerry. So whether it includes it or not, as long as it's the same for everybody, that's really all that matters. Alberto?
I think Andy was ahead of me.
I think Jerry largely addressed the question.
I got a couple things, and, I am old and slow, but we spend $63 million on the school. We have 4,200 kids, 4,300?
That's
42, give or
accurate.
take.
Okay.
It's a moving target all
So
the
if
time.
Portuguese math says divide 63 million by 4,200, it comes out to 15,000 per kid. How are we only doing 11?
Again, I think it's based on,
It's a formula.
it's based on the formula that the state provides.
It's not direct.
Okay, because I'm just looking at simple math. 63 million, 4,200 kids, 15,000 a head.
We were asked that same question last night.
There are,
It's a good.
So you're saying something from the state doesn't make sense?
well, no, what I'm saying
Very
is,
ironic.
there are
I'm saying
allowable,
everything they say is completely accurate.
Okay, number two, you're showing a budget of 46 million for this year. I'm thinking we paid 62 million.
Again, operating.
Okay,
We're looking at
so
operating.
we have 4 budgets for the school, if I still remember right. One was our mortgages.
Yep.
So like, when we bought Woodland, all of a sudden, you're paying 3 million a year.
Correct.
We don't add that on to the, that's not part of the 48.
Correct.
no.
We have, is it 50%, 60% of our medical benefits are school-related? We don't add that on.
That's what I said, yeah.
Right. The third one, sped and then operation budgets. Is
So
sped?
Sped is in there.
That's in
Sped
Okay,
is in there.
so this is, the 4% you're asking for
4.45.
is with sped
Correct.
and ELL.
Correct.
Correct.
Because normally we break those out because you don't have any control. 1 or 2 kids come in and that can be 150,000 per kid, right?
But that still
Right.
falls under the operating.
No, I understand, but I just want to make sure, this is not 4% or 4.45% plus net sped. This is all in.
Correct.
Okay,
All
so
in for-
that's
all in for
new.
operating.
And the last thing is, I got to ask you, this is great, building plan. I mean, I've been yelling, there's a new school coming in 8 years, we're redoing the high school. I know it's coming, so let's save for it. But where's the improvement plan? Where's the part that,
That'll be part of the long-range education facilities plan. And again, we're gonna be looking for feedback, so depending on which direction we go in.
okay, so we're going to get,
We'll drive some of the requests.
we're going to
because-
get the improvement plan of performance along with the improvement plan of buildings.
So they're two separate things. So right now we've got a strategic plan, and we're in the second year of 3 years. And we've already seen improvements based on the implemented actions from the strategic plan. What the facilities plan is, and I just want to make sure it's clear. The facilities plan is really driving not only the big projects, but also like a roof project, replacement of windows, that sort of thing. The strategic plan is, generally, we've gone 3 years because we felt like 5 years was too far out, and when we had a 5-year plan, we made too many changes, and it became something that sat on a shelf. We've got a living, active 3-year plan that we're updating every year.
Dang, we went a lot longer when we were budgeting for Brookside. 3-year plan, I don't know how to budget for a school renovation in 3 years.
But that's
Tag
different than
along behind you.
facilities.
Oh,
Can I tag
okay.
along behind you with another comment? He brings up the building of the high school. When are we gonna do something with Memorial? It's in a total
So
state
that's,
of disrepair.
yeah, so
Yeah,
the whole school structure, we basically prioritized, obviously Woodland's at the bottom, so I'm not giving away any secrets before we present this.
I hope
Yeah.
so.
The school committee, but we basically prioritized each of the schools in order, based on their needs, and we're connecting that to some of the major projects that we may have to do prior to, like, the first couple of renovations.
So you're talking about major maintenance-type projects, repairs and those kind of things that you're trying to coordinate with building improvements at
Correct.
the
Based
same
on-
time?
Yeah, so based on the order of how we do the buildings, and we've got a couple of kind of options we're gonna discuss with the community, we'll drive, like, for example, the high school has a new roof that we need to put on, whether we renovate, build a new building, or keep the one we have and just pop a new roof on it.
My only comment would be, there are no secrets from the Finance Committee. We need to know every nook and corner, everything that's going, so we can plan
Absolutely.
to fund it. So there's no secrets from the Finance Committee.
And one of the, yeah, so Jerry, if I can just respond to that. One of the reasons why we had NESDEC do a full facilities evaluation is they really looked at, like, all the major systems in each of the buildings. So they
Okay.
gave us a real sense of, and Rob Quinn is on top of it, but it's also good to get, like, an objective outside.
Sure.
outside
I
view.
have no problem with at all of getting an independent
Yeah.
expert, because we did that with the youth center recently on the air conditioning upgrade, and the result was very, very good. We actually got a very detailed plan, and something we can understand. And I would encourage you to do the same thing, so,
We've got that in hand already.
so,
That was part of the process of kind of coming to the conclusions we're gonna present.
okay.
And just to
Yeah.
finish, what Jen said really ties in. It's great you say motherhood, apple pie, we reduce class size, life gets better. But before we go spending, 50, 80, $100 million, I want to know, what are you planning, to get to this level? I mean, we don't. We need a class size of X. You're not going to get there if you got 30 kids in a class. You're not going to get there if you have a class demographic of this or that. But I really appreciated 15 years ago, when we first said, Brookside, there's a school coming, that we understood class size to get to the quality of education we need has to be this big. And this is how we're going to get there. Because just saying we're throwing a teacher or two doesn't feel like you're driving towards a goal. It's kind of like, just throw some fuel in the fire and we'll go faster.
That's why I just want to ask, because I've asked it a couple times now, and I think I'm still confused. You guys had a long-term educational plan that was a 10-year long-term educational plan that concluded with Woodland. And that long-term educational plan was education and buildings together. That was like a whole one program that said, this is where our school system is going to be in 10 years. And yes, and then we've always had them, and they've always culminated with a building. Now it sounds like we've kind of separated them and had a strategic plan, and then your facilities plan almost just sounds like your capital projects list.
So
that's where I just want to make sure. I think
it's a great question. I think they're definitely tied together. And this is where it gets tricky to kind of explain it in a way that I think is easily understandable. Is I think the facilities plan is tied to education clearly, because some of the things we're going to recommend are going to drive some of the things we're going to do programmatically. But the big driver of program is going to be the strategic plan, and I think it really always was. The shifts to grade configuration, shifts to some educational philosophies are definitely going to be. I think there's an interconnectedness there, without question. But I don't think it's prudent to say in 15 years we're going to be able to predict what a classroom is necessarily going to look like, or a particular project or program. But we're going to say, like one example
Once
is...
again, Kevin, I'm not arguing that your way seems like it actually kind of does make more sense to me, but I just want to, because it's different than we've done it for years. It was a long-range educational plan that encompassed both the education of our students as well as our buildings. And it seems like we kind of split them apart, which once again, to me, it actually kind of does make more sense, because you wouldn't know what you're teaching the kids 10 years from now, because the way they teach math seems to change every 3 years. So I understand that, but just for my understanding and for the public's, that we really have kind of separated what we used to call the long-term educational plan is kind of a pairing of the facilities plan as well as your strategic plan, which you're upgrading every 3 years. Does that seem?
Yeah, absolutely. But like an example would be, again, I'm not letting any cats out of any bags, but like with the high school programming, we're really moving towards more college and career readiness type programming where we're trying to link a student's experience to a particular employment field, either connected to direct employment, some, college courses, some high school courses that really prepare them for whether it's something very specific like hospitality and tourism management or something more broad like business and banking where business could cover, a variety of, potential careers in fields. But that's the direction we're kind of seeing education kind of going, and I think you'll see some of that tied into some of the proposals that are connected to the long-range facilities plan that also kind of tie back to the strategic plans that we're developing.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you, just like that makes
Yeah,
much
yeah,
more
yeah.
clarification.
Jerry hit
for
it
me.
because, we're saying high school, because that's just what mentally we're thinking.
Yep.
If the long-range educational plan says, holy moly, Batman, we need to fix Memorial before we do anything, then you need it to tie together, because we need to know what is the most leveraged investment to get to the educational plan, not, hey, we're gonna build a new school and then let's fix it around it.
Yeah, so we're dealing with, like, with any, if I can just respond to Al's comment, and then, with any, like, long kind of term planning, we're dealing with a number of knowns, but there's also a number of unknowns. Circumstances change. One of the things that is a concern going into this, and we're struggling with in terms of incorporation, where it's gonna be something that's gonna be tangible, is, there's a lot of talk around universal preschool. And, I don't think there's a community in the Commonwealth that is, and there's probably a couple, but that are prepared to house, like in Milford, it'd be around 300 preschoolers or 600 preschoolers if we go to like 3 and 4 year olds. So that's one of the unknowns that we're trying to figure out because, where Shining Star lands, what's the scope of that program is something that we're gonna have a very difficult time saying with 100% confidence or certainty, is this plan going to fall within a 10 or 15 year period? Is universal preschool going to be brought in as for 4 year olds or 3 year olds at some point? And that I couldn't answer. And if someone says they know, they're probably lying to you. So that's an example of like an unknown that we're struggling with the plan.
Jerry, then Jeff.
I'm moderately concerned that your facility plan, you're talking about 8 years. That's way too far out. This plan on the high school and on Memorial School should be in its inception stages now. So we can start planning on these things within the next, I don't think the high school can go another 5 to 10 years without a major renovation now. I don't think Memorial School can go another 4 or 5 years without at least I hate to use these numbers because I used $2 million on the youth center and it ended up being $5 million. Okay, and that's the problem when you lowball these things. But I think you need to spend 10 million on Memorial and possibly 15 to 20 on the high school just to get it up to par. When I travel around the country, I make it a point to go visit these facilities. Okay, when I end up in St. Louis and their ball field looks better than Fenway Park, okay, that's in the middle of that's in Missouri. Okay, you go to Florida, you go to Texas, you go to these places. And we're way behind. Okay, so my only encouragement is let's go. Let's get going. Yeah, I don't want to foot the bill, but we have a way of funding these things and getting it done. So let's not wait 8 years and wake up and find that the building's falling down on us.
It's not, yeah. So I think there's I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Is I think we'll have the plan in place with, because one of the things we want to make sure, and that's why we're going to be talking to you guys, talking to folks at the town, and hearing from the community, is we want to understand kind of, we just finished the Woodland project a couple of years ago. We want to understand kind of what the community's capacity and ability to, potentially take on a major building project or 2 major building
He's got a
projects.
$60 million bill for stormwater, by the way.
Correct. So that, and we understand that there's a lot of moving parts that they kind of play into what it's going to look like. And I think when you see the plan and what we're projecting and what would, like, one pathway and what the kind of building and renovation process would look like versus the other pathway and what the potential building and renovation process would look like. I think it'll be clearer. I just want to present the full plan to the school committee first and then come to you guys.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to say too much.
Jeff?
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy and Karen. So a few things. We've talked about this. It's great that the Chapter 70 money has been decent. My concern is, I'm looking at the very last slide, 2010, the percent of the local contribution was 61% of the total budget was the town responsibility.
is.
No, it's 40, the total budget, but I mean, the local contribution for the school budget. Now it's 48. If it goes back to that 60, with stormwater, with everything else, that's a big nut going to the taxpayer to make that difference up. So that's why I say, you hear me talk about, we need to control that, what we spend, if we keep adding these programs. But if that drops off, we have a big problem. We have a big, big problem. It could be, do we want to go back to last? I don't, but it's a concern, right? Couple of things. I know, Craig, you had mentioned, we talked about the scores and the state average. I'm not a big state average fan with the scores. You talked about pulling districts like New Bedford and stuff that are similar demographics to it. Did we get that? To compare like student data to that and spend and all that? And I forget what you called it. You called it a certain.
The DART data?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
you can pull the DART data off the, thank you. You can pull the DART data off of the DESE website, sure, for all of that, for financials, for
Well, I think there's some.
accountability data.
I think at someone's point, it just makes it more relative to me to what we're doing compared to someone that's similar to us. You know what I mean? That makes sense to me. And then last one, I know it's on the agenda, talked about choice, and I don't know if you're getting there yet, but that's a big number for us. That choice out and choice in. We spend the money out, the money comes in, it goes into you. There's not an offset there. That's a problem. And I know I'm one looking for how we're going to address that and curb it. And I know some of us have the chart, the trend, and I know the number curb, the money didn't. The money still went up. So I'm less concerned with the number if the money comes with it. But
They
that's
came
not.
in and presented a plan to us, maybe 2 years ago, on how they were gonna.
The new numbers, and I hate to cut you off, Bob.
It's all right, no
The new numbers for choice we're not going to really get those until November or December because they're part of what's called the October SIMS data. So we're not going to have all the information of like the students who went out to different districts, and and people are moving in and out all the time, so it sometimes shifts our choice numbers. But what we've seen trend-wise, and again, I don't have it directly in front of me, but we've cut the gap by about 38 students in the last couple of years. The choice out number has definitely flattened. One of the things I think it's important, for the finance committee and the public to understand is that, we're in a different spot, and everybody's in a different spot than we were 30 or 40 years ago. There weren't charter schools. I think school choice has increased just as a matter of practice. Homeschool numbers are up across the state. And again, we pay for charter schools, we pay for choice. We don't pay for homeschool. But we're seeing it's a much more consumer-based environment in education, and that's true of every community. And you can play private schools into it too. Again, we don't pay out for private schools outside of what Kathy was talking about when it's a special education placement. But I think we're seeing good movement with the choice. But I think I've said this to the committee, definitely the subcommittee. I don't know about the full committee. Is once a student leaves, it's very difficult to get them back. And our goal really is to market to the customers that we currently have, which is our students and families, and keep them in place. We're going to be reaching out this year at key grade level points to some of the folks who've choiced out to say, hey, would you consider Woodland? Would you consider Stacy? Would you consider the high school? We've done a ton of events and marketing that I think are really making a difference, and we're hearing a lot of positive positive comments and communication about, the experiences students and families are having in the Milford Public Schools. So I think it's going in a really good direction. But you're not going to see 50 students come back to Milford. That's just not realistically going to happen. What I liked in terms of the last 3 years of trend data is that the choice out has leveled off. And what's gonna drive it sometimes too, what's gonna drive it sometimes too is say we have a year where 15 or 18 kids choiced out and those kids graduated, our numbers might artificially look better for a year or two. So it's driven by, and we've provided that information to you by each year, how many kids in 12th grade, 11th grade, 10th grade, all the way through. We've also provided what towns they've gone out to. So we've done a lot of analysis, and I think we're doing a lot of marketing. But again, I don't think you're going to see, you're just not realistically going to see like dramatic jumps. We've seen a big jump in, which benefits us but doesn't benefit you. But the other piece to remember too, and that's why I always want to emphasize that I don't like to see like a town versus school kind of thing, because we're all part of the same community. What I really like to see is, like Medicaid. Our Medicaid collections are going up. And what was it this past year, Kath? About 450,000?
Yes.
And this coming year, we're looking at what, 600?
Well, it's definitely gonna go up because of that out-of-district increase, and that's part of the Medicaid submission. So we should see an increase in FY19.
And that's like an example of like a service that we provide that goes directly to the town by statute, where the choice in and choice out is set by statute as well. Although I personally like how that's set up from a school perspective, it's every town is doing that. And for the Medicaid money, it goes directly back to the town, but it's services we provide. And our special ed office does a tremendous job of, categorizing, and it's very detailed work.
Kevin, that was important, because previous to the previous administration, somebody cut the Medicare collection effort.
Right.
Because it saved half of an equivalent person.
Right.
And we lost $300,000
Correct.
to the town.
Correct.
So, 1 year, 300 grand, and we saved 40 grand on school salary.
Right.
That was infuriating.
That's
Because it's just not fair. It's not good for the town.
jumping over the quarter to save the nickel.
You got it. So we really do understand that you've kept almost a full-time person, but that brings $400,000 into our general kitty.
Yep.
So, as much
No,
as
and
we
it's-
beat
it's-
you up
that's why,
on school
like,
choice and
every
all,
dollar
we
to
know
me
the
makes
other
a difference.
pieces.
And I take it personally very seriously, because I think the Milford Public Schools are excellent and outstanding. And if there's a family that's considering either bringing their child back to the Milford Public Schools or considering choicing out, I personally will meet with that family and that child, as will the high school principal, as will our athletic director, as will our music director, and we really try to put a personal touch to it. But there's a variety of reasons, and people have choices and options.
So we can't beat up Mr. Calorie because he promised to do marketing and bring
We've
people
done,
in?
yeah, we've done it.
He actually lived up to his campaign
He
promise?
has lived up to his campaign promise.
I'm sorry, Joe, yeah.
You mentioned a couple of times in your talk right there about you've provided us the data regarding school choice.
Correct.
Somehow or another, I didn't get on that mailing list.
So we gave it to the subcommittee, but I can.
You're holding out on us, huh?
I can very easily. I can have.
Like I said, there are no secrets from the finance committee. We need to know that information.
That sounds kind of ominous to me, Jerry.
All the dollars and cents get driven by the information that you provide us.
Absolutely.
And that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And when we don't have the information, we kind of make up our own as we go along.
Yeah.
And that's not good for you.
So let me do this for you guys tomorrow. I'll send it to Chris so you guys all can have it. He can distribute it to the full committee as,
Well, just
as an
send it to me
electronic document.
directly. I don't need it.
Send it to distribution.
I was gonna say, please, let's not get it to the subcommittee chair and copy the chair.
Yeah, perfect.
Because then you've met Jerry's transparency.
Yep.
If we don't share amongst ourselves, shame on us.
Yeah.
But if you get it to the chairman and the subcommittee chair, and that's every
Upload it into
department,
the files so that we have
it should get around.
And what I can say too is if any of you have any like individual questions about like the school choice trends or numbers or like the charts, just reach out to me directly and I'm happy to have a conversation with you.
What's the largest choice out number that we have? What school is stealing more students than anybody else? I'll use that number. People will remember that tomorrow morning.
Down the hill,
What is it?
down the hill.
Oakdale.
Oakdale, okay. I kind of saw that in some things, okay.
Yep.
Is that, it's because of the proximity, I don't know, never mind.
There's would be a lot of different factors.
Excuse me?
I'm sure there are a lot of factors.
There's a few factors, I believe, but.
Yeah.
We'll share that data with
Do
you.
you have a program where, and I can't imagine anyone would use it, I don't know if anyone would use it, if people are thinking about leaving, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't call Comcast and say I'm thinking about changing it to Verizon, like, how, it's a hard thing to do. I mean, do you have something in place with that, or?
Yes, what are you talking about?
So generally, like, if a family is dissatisfied for some particular reason, whether it's a particular decision that was made or an experience in a classroom or a grade level, a lot of times they share that dissatisfaction either with the teachers they're working with or the principal. And if we feel like somebody is, potentially making a move, sometimes we have those conversations.
Okay, great. Awesome, Joe.
So, if you do those exit interviews are the people that choiced out, I'd be interested in that data because, and going back to what we've talked about a million times, if it goes back to scoring, say, level 3, MCAS, SAT, if it goes back to that, now that begs the question, okay, how are we gonna fix that? And that's, I think, a big question, and I know it's a big question in this room, you know what I mean? And-
It's yeah, and we did a study, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, where we called every single family that had choiced out, and I think we had a reasonable sample that we returned. And again, I don't have it in front of me. Yeah, but the factors varied
I
kind of.
remember Corey came in and she gave
Yeah,
us
she gave a
the
presentation.
presentation,
Yeah, yeah.
Question, just because I know as a parent of a student, I've been getting emails from you about MCAS results. I've also seen a considerable amount of data on MCAS results. Do you guys want to enlighten us with some information?
up and kind of talk about that broadly.
Have a seat.
Could you identify yourself?
Craig Consigli,
And?
Assistant Superintendent, Curriculum
Thank you.
Instruction Assessment.
You're big on that tonight, huh?
I just,
'cause
I
people
want to
keep
say
telling me,
another,
let people talk and they don't know.
I know you just
who
trying
the
to
voices
talk.
in
You just
the-
don't usually do that, I'm just saying.
Proper protocol. Just tell us
It
what you
is,
are.
I know, Jerry, he just doesn't usually do it.
I just want to say
Jack.
about school choice real quick. I know that we noted the majority of students go to Hopedale. The majority of kids that come in come from Hopedale. So it's kind of a two-way street.
Wash?
Well, I don't know if it's a wash, but the majority of kids that come in come from Hopedale. So,
I mean,
so so.
If it's a net zero, then.
It's
then
not a net-
It's not a problem.
It's
but
it's not a net
One
zero.
or two, it's not a problem. If it's
Yeah.
one or two this year and then it goes the other way next year, it's not a problem, and I understand that. But this problem has been sitting here in front of us for like 8 or 9 years now. We've got a deficit in school choice, and we've got to get that fixed. It's hurting us. It's hurting us. So I don't have the answer. I'm looking.
Well, with that being said, I mean, the schools do a lot that we can to get kids back into our schools. As a town, the town at whole has to do a lot better too, to drive people to come to town, to have their kids go to our schools as well. You know what I'm saying? It's not just the school department. Yeah, we're a huge part of it, yes.
Oh, I
But the
think
town
you're,
as a
I
whole
think
has
you're
to
a
do it
huge,
itself.
huge part of it. The school is like the magnet.
Understood, but I mean, it's not just the schools. I mean,
No.
we need to bring people into town to get them to go to our schools.
But I also think you brought up a good point earlier about facilities, right? So you look around at other towns.
Have you been to Natick since they've redone their schools?
It's
All you have to do is
fantastic.
drive
I've been
over
there.
and
Yeah.
see Hopkinton.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, no, it's great.
I go there for soccer tournaments with my grandchildren. It is like Taj Mahal. I mean, they have outdoor.
But you have Taj Mahal
Well,
on the
they're
other
saying
side
the
of
same thing
town.
about
I was just
Woodland.
gonna say, that was the whole argument about Woodland, is Woodland is gonna
I
solve the
remember
school
when Joe
choice
first brought
problem.
out, we were losing the bulk of the kids.
But you're not, I just
going
don't think you're
1-2.
gonna see that for a few years anyways, because you have this whole group of kids that never went to Woodland, right?
Well,
So,
Craig, Joe had brought up way back when he was running, that the first and second graders was where we're losing a lot going into third and fourth because they were scared of Woodland. So I would think somewhere now, it may take 2, 3, 4 years,
Scared of the old Woodland?
the old Woodland.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, no, the idea was, people look at the old Woodland, they say, yish.
yeah.
But now, all of a sudden, we should be able to start that trend going the better way.
But one thing that I wanna highlight that they said that I agree with, no one is moving their kid from Milford to Hopedale and then 2 years later taking him from Hopedale. It's such a huge commitment to move your kid out of town. I'm sorry, once I moved my kid out of town, I would never say to my child, okay, fine, we're moving back again. And then in 2 years, I'm gonna move you to, that's not something you do with a kid's education. So to that point, I wanna agree with you that once you move your kid out of town, I can't imagine there's that many families that are gonna say to them, okay, fine, we're gonna come back now. So it is to Jerry's point, that you are, and Craig's, that you're gonna see that, but you're probably gonna see it in 2 to 3 years, and the non-leavers, not the coming back, because I just don't believe a lot of people would do that to their children. Maybe that's just me, I don't know.
I just want to piggyback on that, especially where you said Hopedale's the biggest in and out. You know, our whole marketing plan is sports, music department, special program. Hopedale has none of that. So why are we losing so many to Hopedale?
Not for that reason, right? That's why they're coming
Obviously,
in.
right? Obviously not. So if it's back to what I said before, if it's the educational component of it, and I'm not saying that it is, but if it is, again, Meg, how do we fix it? How do we fix it and curb that? You know, because if it's certainly not the programs, like I said, we have the programs.
Mr. Chairman?
It's education and culture. I mean, can all dance around this, and we can all talk in, outside. We all know what we're talking about here, so we don't,
Can we do
we can sugarcoat it, but that's what it is.
Can we do something? Well, we've only seen the school committee and the school leadership in front of this committee like once a year.
That's why we're having them in now, and we're gonna have them in on a more
I
current
really
basis.
think-
You guys
I
asked
really
for it,
think
and I'm
in
giving
light-
it to
In
you.
light of the circumstances that we're dealing with, we need to see these people more often.
That's what we're trying to do.
I would like to
That's
see.
the plan of these.
That's
We're
why they're here
starting
on
that,
Thursday
yes.
I would
night.
like to see
We've
you
had
on a monthly
conversations about
basis, or
that.
at least have a communication from you on a monthly basis.
I'm not gonna send
After-
every
after
month,
two
Jerry.
times of that, you'll
No
change your
offen-
mind.
No offense,
Or you guys could come to our meeting.
unless they're
We
bringing
got a
us in.
subcommittee for that.
But I think a minimum would be a quarterly update.
Well, we're
Yep.
trying to
Yes.
have monthly subcommittee meetings.
Absolutely.
And we will report at least that.
Okay, you gonna give us the data? Or you gonna-
Yeah, the other thing, Jerry, I would encourage is we have a number of events that kind of deal with a lot of different things, a lot of different issues or highlight programs. And one of the things that I do is I send out a monthly email to all the parents and families in town. And what I can probably do is just copy you guys on that. So that'll give you a little more
That
of a
would probably
sense.
be a big
Like-
head start.
Like, for example, like we're doing a big financial aid night at the high school tonight. You know, there's a lot of things like that going on. Last night we did a presentation on the budget. We have an activities and athletics and program night that for middle school students. Like, I think it's good for you guys to kind of get a taste of.
If you
And
send
if you
it-
could include that, I get it just because I have kids.
Right.
I should probably be forwarding it to you guys just as a moment of
If you send it
interest.
to me, then it's my option to read it or not. And if I fail to read it, then that's my fault. So-
Jerry, the
So what I'm
school-
saying is I can send it out to you guys.
Can
School
you please,
choice-
and on my end, I'll try to do it
School
on.
choice data is on the FinCom drive. So, okay, so I mean,
I know
so
where it
it's
is.
out there.
I know where it is.
All right, Craig, let's get back to you.
All right, I'm ready, I guess. So, there's a lot of confusion around MCAS data, especially this year. The system has changed. So, I'm here to tell you we're never going to be a level 2 school because they've done away with the leveling. So there's no more levels. We're not a level 3 school. We'll never be a level 2 school. It's gone. And I think with good reason. I think what happened with the levels, it was designed to do a certain thing, and people used it as a way to measure good schools, and that's not just, it's just not the way it was supposed to be intended to be used. So they've come up with this new system, and it's kind of complicated, so I'm going to do my best to explain it to you. So bear with me. I've done it a few times. I've sat through several webinars, and I'm still not 100% on it, so I'll do the best I can. So first of all, there's additional accountability measures. So before, you were talking growth scores or achievement scores. Now there's other things like English language proficiency. There's graduation rates or dropout data. There's also absenteeism, thank you, and things like that, okay? There's also, before they measured whole districts on the lowest performing school. Now that's not the case. Now they try to measure it on the entire district. So if there's one school that's not performing as well as others, it's taken in the aggregate, so it's based on the entire school system. There's two levels that you can be measured on. There's districts that need assistance and districts that don't need assistance. Right now, we're a district that doesn't need assistance, which means that we're partially meeting targets, okay? The state set certain targets for us to reach, and this is the complicated part, it's based on 1 year's worth of data. So based on last year's data, they set a target for us to meet on all those different areas that I mentioned. If we didn't meet it, we were rated either as a no change, as declined, or as improving but not meeting, or we met it, or in some cases we exceeded whatever the target was. But again, it's only based on 1 year's worth of data. So I think it'll be more telling for us as the years go, because it'll be based on more years. So take it for what it's worth.
Now, will the decline be always from the previous year? Is that how they'll
Maybe.
handle that? Because if that's the case, then it doesn't matter that it's 1 year's data. That's why I'm asking.
Maybe.
Because if you're only taking it from the previous year, then it doesn't even matter it's 1 year's data.
Well, where the target's set, I think, is going to be based over a series
That's what I'm
of
asking.
years.
I would think that they would try to do an aggregate
Yeah.
score, because if it's just the previous year,
Yeah.
then to be honest with you, you can look at it and say,
But let's also keep in mind that we're talking about last year's kids and this year's kids. So that's why it's hard to say that this group declined, because they may have started lower than the other group in the
Yeah,
first
that's why I'm
place.
just trying to figure out where the median is on this,
Same
and
cohort?
No,
So they change.
yeah, so like,
The cohort
it'll,
changes in population from
Right.
here to here.
right, so that's why it's difficult to say that this group declined. The only thing that works like that is the growth score. So the growth score takes the same cohort of kids, but the achievement score doesn't, and the rest of those measures don't.
So it's still a little bit of a moving target too, because
I can't
that's
see
okay.
your face. and I don't get-
Accountability in the past was based on 5 years. So they basically took 5 years of data, and weighted the more recent years more heavily, and the fifth year was weighted less. We're still wrapping our heads around how they're doing the calculations, because right now we're in the third different test, especially at the grade 3 through 8 level. We had the old MCAS, we had the PARC test, and now we have the MCAS 2.0 or next generation MCAS test. So there's really only 2 years of data with the new next generation of MCAS test. For the 3 through 8 level, before it was PARC, and before that it was the original legacy MCAS that came into play based on the 1993 education reform. So although we can still see with standards what some of the trends and patterns are around performance, because even though the tests are, the formats are different, what they're asking sometimes is different.
Are we gonna get trend reports?
Right now, it's only 2 years.
Like I said,
We-
the third year is not a great trend report, but it is the beginning of a trend.
Correct.
And I guess that's my concern, is if it's all constantly trending downward.
It's not though.
It's not, though.
It's not.
If it's flat, I could, or some pieces.
So we're seeing, and I'm jumping in on Craig already.
Yeah,
But what but what we're seeing is, in terms of growth, we're seeing very good growth, which is the student growth percentiles, which is basically, if the growth percentile is 40 to 59, it's basically considered a year's worth of growth. Below 40, the students are getting like less than a year's worth of academic growth. 60 or above, they're getting more than a year. So for ELA, all of our scores are basically ranged, and I'm talking full grade level aggregates, are ranging for ELA from the high 40s to kind of at the high school level, we're at about a 57, which is really good. For math, we're pretty solid from 3 through 8. High school is, I think it was like 38.4, which is not where we want it to be. But
That won't get you in any engineering school, that's for sure.
well, but it has nothing to do with college admissions. But what we're seeing is the growth is going up, trending up at the high school for math. So it's not where we want it to be, but at least it's trending up. So that's kind of the good news. We definitely want to see it in that 40 plus range. But we're seeing, like, I think the year before it was like low 30s. And again, Craig's got the numbers in front of him. But what we're seeing with ELA is across the board, our scores are solid to pretty strong.
Math and science as subject matter across the state is a big challenge. We just are not producing enough qualified teachers in math and science to fulfill the requirements in the school system.
And I can say we've recruited a number of math teachers and science teachers in the last couple of years, and if we want an elementary teacher, we get about 400 applicants. If we want a physics teacher, I have to beat the bushes to get 5. So it's a different market for teaching.
The colleges are not producing them. They're just,
Correct.
They're just not.
Correct.
I used to be
Whatever.
on the
What does
board.
that have to do with anything?
Well, it's just what the struggle.
Great, okay, thanks for the editorial comment. Can we
So,
proceed?
so I'm going to let Craig take over and talk about the trends, because otherwise I'll jump in and.
Well, I have to say, the one thing that the state, they cautioned us on was comparing one year to the next using this new system. They said that there's no way to crosswalk between last year, the system that was used last year, and the system that is used this year. So they cautioned people to say, hey, we're growing in this area, we're growing in that area, because there's no correlation between the two systems. That said, the one thing I could say is we met targets. If I go school by school, we're meeting targets at Woodland, which means that they set those targets for us. As a school, we're at 79% meeting those targets. If you're over 75%, that's considered meeting targets. At Stacy in the high school, we're not meeting targets. Well, sorry, that's not the way it's read. It's improving towards meeting targets or something is what it's called.
Well, that was the case, but I mean, out of 26 out of the 30 things were below on Stacy. So that's why I identified that one as,
Yeah.
I saw that school really stuck out in my mind. I don't know if it did the same for you.
It did, but I think, honestly, you can't, it's difficult to say, but you can't really just look at that data without digging into it and saying, all right, how did this subgroup do? How did that subgroup do? And what was happening curriculum-wise for this group of kids or that group of kids?
'Cause it's hard for a non-educator, and even, to be honest with you, it seems like it's even hard for you to identify things. So when I see something and I see that 26 out of the 30 data points
Yep.
are below expectation, there's only 4
Well,
expectations. To me, I look at that and I'm kind of like, but see, that's why, and I don't understand it. So I don't know if we need a communication policy from you guys to explain to people what you're trying to explain to us, because
Yeah.
I know that people see it and they say to me, what the heck's going on? So
If we keep this in mind, right? So you have a target that's set, and you have the group that was here last year. So they looked at that data, and they said, okay, this is gonna be the target for this year. And it was, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids from last year that they built this target on. Now you have this other group of kids, one group, the 8th grade kids that were there last year are gone, right? And then the 6th grade group comes in and it's a new group. So there's a different cohort of kids. That cohort of kids declined, is what that means, when compared to the cohort from the year before. Does that mean that the school is underperforming? I guess according to an MCAS score it does. But it doesn't mean that the school in general is underperforming.
to me, it says that Woodland is underperforming.
Why Woodland?
Because
that's the feeder.
That's the feeder.
One group, right?
Well, you can't argue that. You can't argue that it doesn't mean a lot because it's not the same cohorts, and then say, well, the cohorts that went in are considerably lower than the cohorts that went out, and Woodland was the feeder.
So one of the
What I
things,
mean?
yeah, so one of,
That churn, every school system.
No, and I know, but that's why, and I'm not arguing with you, but you can't argue both things, because if you are gonna argue that, then you can't say it's Stacy's fault. Well, the only person you
I
can
didn't say
blame
it
is.
was Stacy's
No,
fault.
and once again, we're talking
All right.
big picture here, but my point is, if a grade left Stacy, and a grade came into Stacy, and Stacy went down, whose fault would you say that is? You'd probably say it's the Woodland that came in, you know what I'm saying?
I
well,
suppose.
I think you're looking
Maybe I'm
at it,
misinterpreting,
yeah,
but the way
yeah,
he said it,
yeah.
it just, that's
So
the way
what
I
I would say is
interpret it.
there's a lot of different factors at play. I think one thing is, I think if you look at some of our demographic trends, we went from, I think about, and again, I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but about 300 EL kids in 2013. We're up to 700 kids in 2018.
Now, I'm not arguing about
No,
that.
no,
I
no,
just
no,
want to
but-
understand it.
Yeah,
That's
so
why
that's why- that's
I
why-
sound like
no,
I'm
no,
being,
yeah,
but I
so
just,
let me-
I
to
get
me,
it.
if I can't wrap my head around it,
I get it.
then I can't.
This
you know,
will
it's
this will
hard.
answer the question a little bit too, because what happens is language acquisition, where kids can actually jump out of the EL program, happens in 3 to 4 years, depending. But it's more complicated when we get EL students at the middle school or high school level. And because those kids take the test and it counts 1 year after they've been here, a lot of the students we get at the middle school and high school level also fall into a category which is called SLIFE, which means students with limited or interrupted formal education. And those students are struggling on 2 levels. One is, they're coming into a place where they have to learn the language to kind of access the curriculum, so they have to learn English. On top of that, especially when we get them at like 8th grade or the high school level, they've also maybe not been in even a school setting in their own country. So it could be 5 or 6 years since they've been in like a school setting. So they've also got huge gaps in their understanding in terms of math, science, English, which poses an additional challenge, which we really don't see at the elementary school, because although you've got the language barrier at
Once again,
kindergarten.
I wasn't. I shouldn't have used Stacy
But
as
it's
an
very,
example.
very-
I
it's
could
very
say I could
complicated.
say
No, but
Woodland and say it was
I do want you to
Brookside.
use Stacy because because I want you to just take the word fault out of it, though, because it's not anybody's
Once
fault.
again, I probably said it the wrong
I think what he's trying to say is Woodland needed more attention because the product isn't what, but wait a minute. Guys, this has been a decade. This has been 45 years that I started out, I was a problem child. I came from that.
Some could argue, Al, you still are a problem child.
Probably. But I came from that demographic that weighed down the Milford school system. I never spoke English.
I came from a family, my father, God bless him, had 4 years of education, right? So we were that group. And you know something? A lot of us came out of that group. Now, what I'd love to see, how do we define a Milfordian? I mean, a lot of us would say 3 generations and you live within 2 miles of your mother. Okay, so if you take the typical Milfordian family, born and raised here, grown up here, how are they doing? This thing of, we mix the troubled kids with the non-troubled and the kids from Mars and Jupiter, and it all becomes a slush. Joe, I begged you for it before. Give me the distribution. Tell me a typical kid who grew up in this United States of America, who's gone through all the education, how are they doing?
On what? On an
performance?
MCAS?
No, in general.
Right.
How are they
And
doing? Are they getting into the...
I don't think we're going to get it on an MCAS, and that's what really frustrates me
Set
about
the
the whole
rules.
conversation.
There's my problem. I
Yeah.
keep hearing that we use this. Wait a minute. The biggest judge in my mind is the colleges. Did they accept our kids?
agree.
Thank you.
Okay?
Exactly.
I mean, I know everybody in this room back there is biased. You should be. You're on the school committee. If you're not biased towards our kids, God help us. But the real judge is when my kids applied to the colleges they wanted to get into. And the real measure, I keep using my daughter. She looked at me point blank and said, Dad, my job as an educator is to get every kid to their potential. And maybe a little bit more. But I teach special needs kids. So not everybody's potential is the same.
Right.
What I'm begging you, as a resident of Milford, is help me understand. You got somebody with a child in the school system. You got somebody who's put 2 kids through the school system. And we don't understand. Show me, like Tommy Davern did back when he had Middle School East, the bimodal distribution. So I can see that the kids who came in at a distinct disadvantage, because they were like me, they showed up and said, what are they saying? What's this language they're speaking? This is Milford. Don't we speak Portuguese? Right? Tell me how those kids did. And then tell me how the kids who live within 2 miles of their mother in a 3rd generation did. That would educate me and let me know where my kids fit in.
So, Al, I think our college data, like in terms of where people are getting accepted, we're still a few percentage points above the state in terms of kids going to 2 and 4 year schools.
What?
We're still a couple percentage points above the state.
State.
Above the state average, because like
average,
in terms of where we're
being
measured. So
accepted, but
basically, it's about
We have
and it-
different tiers of colleges, and that makes a whole.
Correct. So we're seeing kids get accepted to Ivy League schools, or what we call Tier 1 colleges. The vast majority of our students will go to state schools, whether they're Massachusetts state schools, or we'll send kids to New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island. But we're getting kids, like, we have 19 AP courses, so kids have the ability to kind of be as competitive as any kid in the country. So we've seen kids get into Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. We're seeing a lot of kids go to UMass Amherst. We're seeing kids at Framingham, UMass Lowell. Some kids are taking advantage of the great financial programs that are offered, where you can do a year or 2 at a community college and then transfer that in and save like $20,000 or $30,000. Which is
a huge number.
Which is fantastic, and we're starting to partner with those colleges and universities to try to get more kids kind of funneled in there, because we're seeing a lot of families that are, kind of running out of money, and they're starting out at a private school, and then they're going back to a community college, and then kind of getting back into it, but in that process, they're losing a lot of money and time.
I think
Kevin,
that's a huge
tell
point.
us.
Just for a second. I think that's a huge point, and that's something that I actually have said to people. When you're not seeing these upper, and you're seeing, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Fitchburg State, Framingham State, or whatever, but you're seeing students that could potentially go to a private school, but their parents see a ticket of $55,000-$60,000 a year
Maybe
and
70.
say,
68.
whatever. But my point is, and they say, listen, you could have certainly gone to that school, and Milford could have had 18 people go to Harvard, but I can't afford 70,000. So I'm sorry, you're smart enough to go there, you have potential to go there, but because of economics, you're going to go to Framingham State, you're going to go to Fitchburg State. And I think every one of us has faced that who has kids, who says, listen, college has become such an exorbitant amount of money that it has become not even a choice of where do I want to go, it's where I can afford to go. And that is reflected obviously in your results when you say we don't have 18 goods go to Harvard. Maybe you could have, but they're all like, well, I can't afford $80,000 a year. So finances, I think, play a huge part in the tier schools that our kids go to.
There's 2 things that are a bigger predictor of kids either going to college and succeeding in college, and that's family income and GPA, then MCAS scores, right?
Yeah.
So you know a kid's GPA and you know their family income, you know whether or not they're going to be successful in
Craig,
college.
tell us, please, that 30 kids went to Tier 1 schools, 80 kids went to Tier 2 schools, and of the 80, you got the National Honor Society. Give them homework. Go research the 60 kids who went to UMass and all, because a lot of them, when we grew up, UMass was your safety school. Today,
It's hard to get into.
It is hard to get
try
in.
and get in, because kids are looking at, well, do I want to graduate Holy Cross with a $250,000 bill, or do I go to UMass for 100-some thousand, and I get to buy my house when I leave? But when you start doing this with the data, slow people like me get confused. It's not hard to parse the data. But I'm asking you, please, I'm begging you, let me understand, that you have 260 kids graduate. Tell me what happened to them,
Okay.
and why? Because like Chris said, maybe we only had 30 go to Tier 1, but 60 got accepted. And financially, the second 30 didn't go, but they had the option. That's your job, is to get them the option, in my mind.
All right, Chuck.
But also, many of these Tier 1 schools, as you call them, Tier 1, Tier 2, or state school or what, they don't offer the major that student wants to take. They don't apply to it.
Yeah, you could have that too.
They'll apply to a state place. My grandson, he's majoring in aviation. He went to Indiana, he looked at Indiana State, he looked at Bowling Green, and at Bridgewater, and they offer aviation. Harvard doesn't offer aviation
Right.
majors, so why are you
Well,
gonna apply there?
We're doing a disservice to kids if we send them to school and they could make $100,000 in manufacturing too.
No question. Jeff?
Al, just to your question too, also on the drive is the 14, 15 graduates attending University College. So Milford has, for that year, Milford has 77% of the graduates went to a college/university. It includes the state schools, includes it all. It's not broken up by Tier 1, it's just how many went. And we're low. We're low compared to the towns around us, not compared to the state, but I mean compared to the towns around, we're low in percentage.
But are we low across our entire demographic? Because we had
Yes.
a lot more kids coming in who weren't educated. The kids who grew up, born, raised in a full system, is that 77% or is it 85 of those? That's what I'm asking you
Total graduates.
to educate us. Break it out. Because it may be great that somebody who just came to America and learning English if you can. If you can't, you can't. But if you can, that'd be great to know, because a lot of parents are worried.
One of the things we're definitely seeing is our middle and upper income families are sending their kids to, tend to send their kids to either the private schools or like a UMass Amherst or a similar type place. And again, like your example about the aviation school is a good one, because every kid is different and kind of what they're looking for. What we're really trying to do and what we're aspiring to do, which is the 23% that you talked about, I don't know if it was 15 or whatever year's data, and it fluctuates from 75 to 85% depending on the graduating class. But what we're really trying to do is we're seeing a higher percentage of first-generation college students. And what we're really trying to do is change the way we do business in terms of providing services to those students around getting them access to college campuses, getting them access to, what's available out there in terms of options. We're also looking at several career paths where kids can kind of get right into the workforce, not to a low-paying minimum wage job, but things like advanced manufacturing. We just added a construction trade course. If you try to get like a plumber or an electrician or somebody to build your house or do a deck or something like that, it's next to impossible, and you're throwing out premium money to get them there. So we want to get the kids into a track where they can jump into maybe an apprenticeship when they leave, or a certificate program at a community college where they can jump into an advanced manufacturing job, which I'm not sure if it's the average of the median salary in Massachusetts is around $75,000 a year, which is fantastic.
Can't hire a new one at under 50.
Right.
And I would think your first-generation college students, in the next 5 to 10 years, that number's going to be astronomical,
That's
I would
going
think, in our
to be
district.
that's going to be
And that's just
jumping
a
up.
guess.
Absolutely, that's
You
going to
know.
be jumping up significantly. So that's why we're really trying to, the new high school principal, Josh Otlin, has taken the vending machine money, and we're using that now to bring kids to college campuses, so they can meet with admissions, folks. They can sit in on a class, they can get a tour, because they may not have the ability or the resources to really visit classes consistently.
I mean, let's be honest. The only reason I went to college is because my parents dragged me. They brought me to colleges, that kind of stuff. When you have a kind of environment where the parents never went to college, they don't have the college education, they are not going to go on college visits with kids. They're not going to go through those pamphlets that you get in them. Probably emailed now, but I used to get them in my mailbox. They used to be full. So it's good, and I heard about the program that Josh is running. It's fantastic because to educate those children about something like that, that's not happening at home. And if we don't do it, those kids aren't going to go to college.
And that's really why
You know?
we just spent, Craig and I and a couple other of our faculty members, I think it was either last week or the week before, spent the day at LaSalle College because they have some programs that we can align to our students around, like, because they want, more diversity in the teaching force. So there's a lot of grant money out there. So there's even a program where they could give a full scholarship to a student. So those are the type of programs we're really hunting and searching for. And what we're trying to do, one of the things about this program, if we can get it off the ground, and I think we'll be able to this spring, is they take a 1-credit college course, which they get like an introduction to like teacher education. They go to the campus a couple times. Some people come from the campus to Milford High School, and then they have a connection, and they have somebody there advocating for them, and somebody who can help them through the application process, the financial aid process. And if you go to a public school, the FAFSA is worse than doing your taxes. The CSS, which is the private school one, they take into account things like home equity and all kinds of crazy formulas that if you're just not, familiar, you don't have good financial sense, they're very difficult to, they're obstacles for kids.
All right, I think I want to let these guys go. We had a very good update. I wasn't questioning the scores. I wanted to understand how to score. So once again, people at Stacy, I wasn't picking on you. I should have picked a different school. Just trying to understand the scoring system.
Yeah, but we should tip our hats that 5 out of 7 school committee members showed up tonight.
Yes, thank you very much, guys, in the back. It just shows the commitment that they have in the back, too.
The other
so.
two are just not in town, that's why they're not.
I was going to call him dead.
Just saying.
No, I get to bust
I'm
his
kidding. I
chops
love
because
the
he's
two of
not
them.
here.
I'm just kidding. There are a ton of stuff. Does anybody else have any questions for him so we can let these nice people go home? All right, we're going to see a lot more of you guys. We're not going to do what Jerry says. You're not going to be in here every month, but
No.
we're going to see you more.
Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks so much for coming in, guys. I appreciate all the info. All right. Any subcommittee reports?
No, the only thing on capital, just so everybody knows, we have slid the 600 from the fire truck into the capital. I'm gonna put it in the spreadsheet. But we're not changing, even though the capital will say 2.1 million. It's really, we're projecting 1.5 plus the fire truck. Okay, just so if you see 2.1, you don't freak out. It's still 1.5 like we've always agreed, but it's just that we slid the fire truck into next year.
Mr. Chairman, we had one action from the last meeting that we had, when the youth center came here and they presented their heating, air conditioning, whatever that was.
Yeah.
Someone wants to see if the electrical system needed to be upgraded in order for them to go forward with that project.
I'm sorry, I came in late at that meeting. I'm sorry. What was?
The company that bid the system for the youth commission made a quantifier at the bottom of their bid that said, as long as the electrical system was up to grade and could handle the requirements of that air conditioning heat pump system.
All right.
Numerous other little
Along with numerous other little things at the bottom. So there was an action to go back and make sure that there wasn't some additional expenditures that were gonna have to be made before they could go
I'm
forward
sorry,
with that.
that's the meeting I came in late to. So I will find out. I'll call them tomorrow and find out.
Okay.
Thank
I
you.
think our approval was dependent on that.
Thank you very
Jerry,
much.
on your committee?
No. Which committee are we talking about, the school committee? No, he's not on that. Sounds like he wants to take over the school committee, and I'd be more than happy.
Chuck, do I have a motion to adjourn, Chuck? Seconded by Jeff. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thanks and have a good night.